We're back for Your Ears Only. I'm David Alpern.
I'm Eddie Robinson with this quote from the news. This case highlights the nationwide scourge, hiding the identities of their contributors. That was Ann Ravel of California's Fair Political Practices Commission after a $1 million fine was levied against the Arizona-based Center to Protect Patient Rights, backed by the conservative Koch brothers and another group for failing to disclose $15 million spent in a California referendum campaign. Now this.
I'm McGruff, the crime dog. See those kids? Every day in this country, 60 kids disappear. Some run away, but a lot are kidnapped by strangers, or even by people they know. So write to McGruff and teach your kids to protect themselves. Help take a bite out of crime.
A classic Advertising Council anti-crime public service announcement, or PSA, from the 1980s, like those against forest fires, pollution, and other seemingly unassailable goals. But the process that produces them is far more fraught with political priorities and special interest agendas than you might imagine, and there can be unintended consequences. The McGruff campaign, for example, contributed to support for public awareness campaigns, neighborhood watches, and inevitably the excesses or misjudgments, as we saw in the Trayvon Martin killing.
The inside story of the Ad Council and its PSAs, many of which are heard in this program, is told in a new book by Pulitzer Prize-nominated journalist and educator Wendy Melillo, How McGruff and the Crying Indian Changed America, a history of iconic Ad Council campaigns, from Smithsonian Books. And for Your Ears Only, Wendy Melillo joins us now. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
The Ad Council likes to think of itself as advertising's gift to America, but you show that it began in part as a self-help campaign when mass media advertising was demeaned as mindless or, worse, misleading.
In the late 1930s, public advocacy groups were concerned that advertising was selling us goods and services that we didn't need, and there was a strong push for federal regulation. The ad industry fought back by coming up with this idea that if we created a council that would use advertising tools to help a government at war, it would be, and indeed was, a brilliant public relations move.
And they became a partner with the government. In the Cold War, the Ad Council also served as a tool for the CIA.
This campaign was done on behalf of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, and it was designed to raise money for those organizations. It was called the Crusade for Freedom campaign. But what citizens didn't realize, and it wasn't disclosed until much later, the campaign began in 1950, but it wasn't disclosed till 1968, that this campaign was actually secretly funded by the CIA. And under federal law, the CIA is not allowed to direct these kinds of efforts toward American citizens. This was basically a campaign to encourage anti-communist sentiments among the American public.
And your book is full of examples of the Ad Council depending on funding from government and corporate interests that it steers clear of offending. What is the council's budget? What proportions come from where? And what does the average PSA campaign cost?
The Ad Council's budget has grown from $20.3 million in 2001 to $40.5 million in 2010. And Ad Council campaigns can be expensive. To walk in the door, it costs $2.4 to $3 million for a 3-year effort. And critics have charged that this is an expensive proposition for some smaller nonprofits that can't afford to meet that entrance requirement. I also studied that out of 38 campaigns the council had listed on its website at the start of 2012, nearly half, or 17, had a federal government sponsor. So on average, half of the Ad Council campaigns are developed with the federal government. And this reflects the critical role that government campaigns play in the Ad Council's revenue structure.
Ad Council focus on what an individual can do seems reasonable, but it also takes pressure off government and big business to solve complex problems like pollution. Talk about the conflict behind the Crying Indian campaign.
This is a fascinating example of how the Ad Council's model, which is to focus on the individual actions people can take to solve a societal issue, can be problematic because the the famous Crying Indian campaign, which debuted in that particular spot that won all of the advertising awards, debuted in 1972, and it was done on behalf of a nonprofit called Keep America Beautiful, based in Stamford, Connecticut. But what people didn't realize was the Keep America Beautiful nonprofit is not your grassroots Sierra Club. It is made up of the packaged goods manufacturers in this country. So think Coca-Cola, Reynolds Aluminum, Glad Wrap. And what this campaign raised was, okay, individuals can pick up their litter, individuals can recycle or try to do something about the garbage problem we have in this country. But isn't there a role for the federal government to help us solve this, as well as the very corporations who are giving us all of these packaged goods that ultimately wind up in our garbage stream?
Even beloved Smokey the Bear has a mixed pedigree in that respect. The conflicting views over whom the forest should be protected for, nature lovers, loggers, other interests, going back to Teddy Roosevelt himself. Tell us that story.
Well, I really traced Smokey Bear back to the very beginning because he grew out of this notion that Teddy Roosevelt really wanted to conserve and protect the forests. But we also have a number of timber manufacturing interests in our forests. So a lot of logging is done in national forests. And so the issue with Smokey is he has a fire suppression message. His message talks about do not, prevent forest fires. Only you can prevent forest fires. Now it's only you can prevent wildfires. Well, that message does not appeal to every audience in America, particularly people who live off the land. Agrarian economies burn small parts of the forests to plant crops, to let their cattle graze. And here's Smokey saying, no, you can't do that. That's harmful to our forests. And that's problematic.
Wendy Melillo is a former journalist, educator, and author of How McGruff and the Crying Indian Changed America, a history of iconic ad council campaigns from Smithsonian Books.
Quote from the news, "The reason we approve these drugs is for people in pain, but we can't ignore the epidemic on the other side." That was Dr. Janet Woodcock, director of the FDA's Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, on tighter controls on prescription painkillers like Vicodin to counter their increasing abuse.
Next, the book on Bezos and Amazing Amazon, for your ears only.